everybody that's out there listening right now. It's just our dedicated metal mic, but if you are perusing the archives, this is In the Kitchen number 6 with Kelly Williams. Kelly, it's a pleasure to have you. I would like to run down just briefly through your many accolades and accomplishments. There's quite a few. First of all, you are a nerd of epic caliber. You've been playing, I'm assuming that means writing, running, playing games, for 34 years.
Yeah.
You're an Army vet with 13 years under your belt. Thank you for all of that, by the way. You are CEO and creative head of Maximum Role Entertainment, or MRE, the podcast channel that is apparently your baby. It's awesome. We're going to get to that in just a bit. Additionally, you are the CEO of Lostlorn Games, a Mark Rein-Hagan thing. That's a big deal. We're going to get to that. You're a freelance writer, and you have done work with Gaxx work, and you're also in cahoots with Media Stream Press. Did I leave anything out of all that? There is a lot.
Oh no, I think that's good. A lot of people do a whole bunch. I have a whole bunch of things. I was like sitting there like, oh, I'm doing my podcast. I'm like, no, this is too. I hate doing long intros. So no, that's perfect. That hits all.
Well, we're going to get back to the other podcast into that too, because again, everything that you have on here. But again, it's great to have you on here. You and I have teamed up on a couple of occasions. And to be honest, if you have watched out there in our audience land the behind the scenes for this, at one point Kelly made the statement that his podcast is his bread and butter. And so I'm a little torn with, do I jump into the nerdy origins of what has become this machine that you have, or just go right into the business end of it? Because I think you've got a ton either way to roll with there. How does that? So let's let you answer that. What is most natural for you now, all this time afterwards? Are you a role player or a facilitator? You think a gamer?
It's. I started playing first and second edition D&D in the late '80s, early '90s, and started running games, but. It's just one of those things where I just fell into the gaming world of all the stuff, and getting into the 2000s during the military and stuff, I realized how big the gaming was getting, and while I was downrange, that's when they started doing streaming and doing you can sign up and play with people from all over the world, and I was like, I want to know how to do that. I want to know of that, and I'm a researcher, and so I went to school, got my MBA, and I did my thesis. I started shifting around towards the gaming industry about midway through, and I just dove into the world of like, how do you create a gaming company? What are the ins and outs of running a business around the gaming while having fun gaming? I feel like there's a separation between both, because people so hyped up about creating world, doing this, and they're not thinking about the logistics of what it actually takes to put all those together to make it into a business. So
when was that, Kelly, whenever you started hitting those logistical hurdles with that?
I think 2010, when I started writing a lot of my own material. Instead, like people have the game books, they got tables. I got binders all, but I started putting them together and then started like really categorizing it and trying to think, okay, down the road I could do this. I want to do that. Oh, you know what? I read a lot of Dragon magazine back in the day where people were just submitting their own adventures, and that was one thing about Gary Gygax that I still find amazing today, is that he really reached out to the community. It's like, hey, send in your stuff. We'll take a look at it, because they're, at the time they were the professionals of the gaming world, and there wasn't.
They were it, really.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
I mean, that was really it at the time. I'm sure there had been some nucleus of this developing in some way here and there, but I mean, unless I'm wrong, that was the first truly published I guess, self-contained reality for role playing.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at a lot of the old books, there's a lot of written books out, fantasy books, but nothing to the point of where they wanted to bring in the reader into them, right? They didn't want, they just published books, fantasy books, made up characters. A lot of it came from token.
Yeah, yes, it did, brother. A lot of it.
No, about 90% of everything comes from, his brain and the world that he created, and then we just kind of branched out. And then I think, Gary and them were like, let's make it so we can interact with what's Red Adventures and get everybody involved. And then it eventually started evolving into, instead of let's put out the tiny module, put out a few books that allow you to interact into. And I think that was the turning point for all of us to be able to make our own world. And that's,
It has come a long way, baby, as they used to say. I remember, so my father is a retired cop, and he came home in I guess it was the late 80s, with a documentation outlining potentially dangerous groups. And for the life of me, I think there was some role play notice there along with AC/DC and Metallica, but there's such a stigma back in the day for role playing as a venue of homicidal sociopaths and nerds. But the truth is, as we've seen with the licensing kerfluffle, millions rose up. It is a deep ocean of nerdery. Deep ocean.
It's one of those things. So the OGL, when it originally came out, that was the avenue that changed the world of third-party people, right? It gave the reader, the D&D storyteller, the ability to now take their homebrews and put it out in the world. And then bigger companies started going, hey, we can money up. We should start building a company and doing what TSR did. And some companies had some of those foundational people help them start, and those bigger companies now, functioning based on TSR platforms on how to do that. And I think with the OGL, it really opened up the floodgates. But if you read the OGL, and this is what I tell on the business side, if you read the OGL very carefully and you understand what some of the different columns are telling you, what they attempted to do last year or 6 months ago was written in it. If you understand how the OGL written, they reserve the right to do that anyway, but they actually did it, and therefore the way they did it wasn't so much Wizards, it was more Big Brother Hasbro, which is the monster machine that absorbs gaming creator, gaming companies. It's not just the fantasy world. They absorb anything that they know they can corner the market for.
Yeah.
Everything.
Sorry. Kelly, I wanted to ask you if you could give us sort of a walkthrough on what your day is like in terms of, you talked about the business you've mentioned, and I know you're the CEO of a couple of places. If you could sort of give us a run through about what your day is like as running a game company as a business, rather than sort of looking at it. Lots of people are like, oh yeah, I've got an idea for a game, and they want to sit down and I'm going to create a game, which is great, but following it through, to that end where you're doing all kinds of the business end aspect is a whole different beast. Can you give us sort of a walkthrough of what that looks like for you on a day-to-day sort of weekly basis? I know it's not every day, but...
Well, no, and that's the thing, I would say about 80% of the gaming companies there aren't structured and the way you would imagine a gaming company be structured, a company be structured. So a lot of it, we live in the digital world, so both companies are basically digital, right? We have our different chat rooms, and it's like being in an office building for a lot of them. So it's just a group of people, and everybody's discussing how they're functioning. And I think with my company, I've kind of stepped back and I was like, you know what, I'm not really pushing anything major out, so I'm going to develop. I'm going to get a bunch of stuff together, and then I'm going to push it forward, right? That's one approach. But with Lostlorn, it's different because of the amount of people involved, and we're in about 6 different countries, right? And so we've looked at Lostlorn. A lot of people that step back, just personal reasons, a lot of things going on, and I've always had the will and want to build a structure, and that's the hardest thing to get with Mark and say, hey, we need to have an actual structure in place. Here's the idea of the structure. Him coming from a company that he did build back in the day and had a structure, you just have to basically throw it in his face and say, we have to do this. We have people that are leaving because there's no structure. They don't feel like they're being hurt. Nothing is being done. So taking over a company is not really a CEO position or an operations officer or a chief financial officer. In the gaming world, it's about how you put that together and recognize that there's a business side and there's a creative side, and how to make those copacetic. And a lot of it is to building those structures, but knowing how to build those structures and how they're supposed to look, and then just kind of get everybody slowly in the door. And being in the military I'm always about small team, right? I love small teams, where some of our teams are about 19 people, and that's where stuff gets lost, right? It just.
Are you referring to Lostlorn?
Yeah, for Lostlorn. Sorry, yeah. So my company, I have 8 people in maximum, and we get a lot of stuff done because, again, small groups, and it's all about giving the creative freedom. Kind of like, I got the idea of some of the people that I write for, they already have a structure of what they want, the product, and they reach out to us and say, hey, I just need a couple chapters, or I just need this, and they give you the outline, right? And so you're able to create, and that's something that I brought to my company. Is that like, hey, let's build a frame, build the meat and potatoes, and then we'll do the other part later, right? We're not in a super big rush. Where Lostlorn, we've been around for 3 years, more 5 years, but 3 years in concept of getting stuff out the door. And we have some products out, but we could be more efficient and have more out, because we have a lot of stuff to sit that we need to.
And just to jump in there, in case you're just now jumping in with this, he's referring to Mark Rein-Hagan of the Vampires fame for Vampire the Masquerade. And it is, so get with that in mind, Kelly. And at this point, with all your history with this industry, and what do you think are the biggest hurdles at this point now moving forward? Because you start looking at things like fabrication of like merchandising, and you can 3D print anything now. And so you don't have to have outsourcing for specific industry now, because you can do 80% of this at home. Stickers, t-shirts, miniatures. I know people that make knives and cleavers and axes. Like, it's, so as far as hurdles go, what do you think the future of it looks like immediately?
I think it's a lot about structure. Again, everything revolves back around structure, right? If you have the structure to build those items and keep it in-house versus, because again, third-party everything is paying for party. And so there's a lot of companies out there in China, Korea, Japan, Canada, South America that will make these products, right? And they're like, we'll do it cheaper, we'll do it this way, but then you have to look at the turnaround rate, and then you have to look at your consumer. If you say, hey, all of our, made in America, but outsource. And a good example, there's a miniature company that said everything's made in America, but like someone made a video and they flipped their thing that they got in the mail, and it was made in China. So it's just one of those, like, it's all about how you structure. Like, if you're going to tell the world that you're doing everything in house, then it has to come in house, right? Now that we can do that, if we have friends, we have people we work with who can make these things. But the problem is about the volume of what you do. So say you put out a Kickstarter, right? And a dice set in there, and all of a sudden you tag it on to like $150 tier, and you don't think anything of it, and you get 200 backers. Well, that's 200 sets of dice that you now have to create if you didn't have it being done, and if someone in-house makes dice and they're like, I got it, just put it on there. Now they have to make 200 sets of dice, and they're going to be like, I can't do that. Then what do, right? You pretty much have to get your fabrication stuff done ahead of time. So a lot of it is about how much money do you have to pre-source all your stuff, get it together before you go to market. Where the bigger companies can do that, right? They can float their revenue and purchase all this stuff, purchase their books, purchase their dice sets, their towers, their products, where even, the smaller companies struggle with that still. So I think it depends on, again, how you structure your in-house and outsourcing and where you go to get it.
So everything you just talked about, obviously comes back to organization, structure. Starts when you got to be quicker, brother. You got to get in there quick.
No, you go ahead. Mine's going to derail us for a second. I want to butt it.
All right.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about the idea of getting your game out there, the product out there, the merchandise, whatever that is, right? The Kickstarter scene has been rolling for a little while now. Is there because we're
every
just
now and
getting
then
into that arena? What's that environment like now? Is it still sustainable for what it's doing? Is it still a viable outlet, or has it already moved beyond its usefulness?
I don't know. Every avenue is still sustainable if you're desired in the market, right? Kickstarter, genius idea, right? We'll promote you out there, but you're still doing all the work. They just built such a big crowd of people that it carries itself, right? And they get their cut because, I tell a lot of people like Kickstarter and BackerKit are third party to your company. They want their cut. And now Kickstarter, I believe, takes either 8 to 15%, depending on how much you make. And so with that, then BackerKit takes a certain percentage at the beginning. But if you want to use their virtual store, if you don't have e-commerce, they get a cut out of that too, of the profits made from that. Yeah. So if you look at it that way, if you can do it, if you're not a big gaming company and you go to Kickstarter and you use all those fancy things in the background, you're only going to walk away with a few thousand a day because if you don't have about 10 or 15 Kickstarters behind you. For example, I did research on a gaming company that I've been talking with, and they had 26 Kickstarters, right? And they made $5.4 million over 10 years, 2 to 3 products a year. But they were so up and down. One project made 28,000, the next project made 65, following one made 15, and then 685,000. It just varies. It's all about your consumer. So you got to find what they're into and that's where all your marketing comes in. It's all about getting the feel of the consumer, because you can go to Kickstarter and have a really amazing product and it go nowhere because no one knows about it or doesn't know you.
Yeah.
Or if it's not properly put together, they don't understand it. And that's the big thing. Your consumer has to understand what you're trying to say and what you're trying to present to them, and who do you have helping you. So a lot of it, people, who's your contributors with you, right? A lot of it, people look. Some Kickstarters I look at, great. Who's helping you? And if it's one that I know, I'm like, oh, if they're backing them, I got them. I won't even read the thing. I'll just back it because I know this company backs them, supports them with their process. So I'll get it. I'll get a PDF,
That's awesome.
Yeah. So again, it's just about your consumer and what you bring to them. So with Lostlorn, we have a few projects that we're going to bring to Kickstarter, but the way we're trying to approach is we want to get the community involved first, right? You want to draw those people in so they're interested. Absolutely. So on the business side, you want to, before you do a Kickstarter, you want 2, maybe 3 months of pre-promotion, getting those emails, right? You're only going to get about 60% of those emails a day. So if you have 400 people, you're only going to get 60% of those to actually back you. And about 5% of those are going to back it again at the end because of financial. So you always got to think about, if you start a Kickstarter and you only have 35 pre-backers, you're probably not going to go anywhere, right? You're only reaching 35 people and they might tell something. And depending on what you charge, the formula for doing that for a Kickstarter, taking what your goal is, taking your minimum tier, so that your minimum tier should be the one that you want everybody to go to and priced where it'll pay that goal that you want, just by doing that one. And then you take the number of backers that it would take from that tier to reach that number, and then you need to multiply it by 3, and that's how many pre-backers you want before you launch.
So there's legitimate math to this.
Yeah, there's math.
There's an algorithm to understanding this. You know me. You and I have been working together now for at least a couple years, and Startsman knows me, and people in the audience. Shout out to Steph Love. She's out there too. It's very perplexing to me that there is such an exactitude to the joy of rolling dice and battling monsters. It's hard to wrap my poor little nerdy head around. Michael, did you have a question though before I lead us off again?
Yeah, but it derails us a little bit from the business.
No, that's good.
We're all nerds here, man.
Metal Mike says capitalism strikes again, just as from the chat, and Steph Love gives you a hard eyes.
True.
So shifting gears a little bit, Kelly, I know that you also write, and I'm wondering about, like, if you what's your favorite genre to write? What kinds of things is it that you write, and do you write for yourself in addition to the things that Adam has already mentioned that you have done some writing for?
I do a lot of, I'm writing about 3 or 4 different little fantasy books on the side. Have nothing to do with any of the companies and stuff that I'm doing. These are just like time travel adventures, and then my adventures in Europe, I'm just writing all kinds of stuff like that. That's kind of the side. But when it comes to like the gaming industry, I'm a researcher. So I went on masterclass and found creative writers, not just fantasy, but like Aaron Sorkin. I listened to a bunch of his stuff, like how to do it in the script style. So I take a bunch of different styles of writing, and something I learned in the military is that you always take the qualities of your leader that suit you, that fit, and disregard everything that doesn't, that's not functional for you, or that you see functional for the team around you. So that has always taught me to find writing style suits, the area. So some of the people I write for, Worx, I backed it, so I got to write. Originally, it was only supposed to be 500 words. I did 5,000. It was an entire thing, and Adam did some art for it, and that book.
That's a ton of fun, man.
Yeah, it was a lot. And so he was really appreciative that beyond what we agreed upon, and I just got into it because I love it. It was about cults and organizations, and so I built this whole storyline about his world and how there's a secret librarian cult out there that is trying to hide the history of the magic that his books are trying to bring forth. And so I think it appealed to what he liked because he's using a lot of it. And so I kind of like that kind of style. And then the World of Darkness with Mark, I don't actually. I've written the Bloodstone Isles. I did a picture. I try not to dive too much into the groups because I don't want to. On the business side of it, you don't want a trap where you're not looking at it objectively, right? Because you start writing as a team, you're moving so fast, and you hear people from the outside, and you don't know what no, that's not how we're going to do this.
Yeah.
But it's not looking like what the direction is. It's what you're writing in them. And if you see stuff as an external person, hey, I wouldn't write that. A, because of the current climate, or B, like people get so involved in writing and they'll write 10, 15,000 words for a chapter. But it's like, is that 15,000 words relevant to that chapter, right? Like, you get so engrossed in your own stuff that, like, you write something about an object and you write 2 pages about it, or an area, and you write 2-3 pages. Your consumer, your reader, might not read the whole thing, and you've just wasted words trying to describe something that you could come back to later in a supplement
or show with an image. Like the idea that you have to waste that much space for the copy is not necessary if you have an art team.
Speaking of art team, we have a question from Metal Mike. Wants to know, other than music, what are other things you do other things do you outsource for your projects?
Artwork. Adam's done a lot of art. I have a lot of people in Spain, Switzerland. Most of my artists are from, and I pay euro for a lot of this stuff. God, they can really hit it out of the ballpark. And some of the people on my podcast do some of the drawing for that portion of the writing that we're doing, which is phenomenal. But I like different styles, right? So I like Adam's style. I have a watercolor artist, and I have another digital artist. I have another one that only does pen. He doesn't do digital or anything. It's all strictly pen. So I like to dive into the different realms but when I put together a project or a supplement or something, I only use 1 or 2 artists for that, because when you start mixing artists into a project, all of a sudden, again, I always look at it as, how's your consumer going to perceive what you're doing, right? If you have one style of art and all of a sudden you have something else that's completely different, the person reading it might be like, do they not want to use the other person? Oh, like, where are they going with it? So I'm always looking at it that way. I outsource music, the sound effects I pay for. I'm all about having the subscriptions, licenses for stuff, so people can't come and say, like, you're not licensed to use those sound effects, or you're not licensed for that art. So I look at the business side of it, and I try to help the artists that don't really know so much about the freelance world and what they deserve, and that people take advantage of. So there's you could do an image 3 different ways and sell it 3 different values for the same image. And so there's always a way to look at it, and it's not trying to rob your consumer. It's trying to make sure the artist is paid for the image that's probably going to be sold dozens of times for huge amounts more than what you paid for. And so there's always licensing things like that. So I'm a huge advocate for license. Make sure that I'm covered, they're covered. Credit is huge in our industry. Even if they write a few words in it, or if they leave a project, they rage out of a company or whatever, you're still gonna put them in stuff because they did something, right? It's all about the credibility in our industry. that's all a lot of us have is your name. So getting it put in a book that's, published by Mark Rein-Hagan means a lot, right? When I first met Mark, I used to play Vampire in the 80s, or in the 90s, early 90s, and I never thought that I'd be working with him and conversing.
Same.
Yeah.
Same. I was in a really ass end of the world in a little town called Knob-Noster, Missouri. And it was the most awful winters. It was terrible, but I discovered Mark Rein-Hagan's Werewolf. And man, that launched me into the D10 zone. And it wasn't until I intersected with Michael here and started working for Battle Sauce that I ever veered out of that. And so, and it actually makes me want to ask you, earlier I had been really curious, you've had all this exposure from other cultures. I'm sure that's influenced the way you have written games, the way you perceive games, and the way you perceive the non-players in the games, things of that sort. What would you call your, if you were to ask me, what is your favorite game you have, not counting Battle Sauce that I'm working on with Michael.
Has he played Battle Sauce yet? Because I think we got to get him and all the rest of the gang to...
Oh, dude, Kelly, you're going to love it.
I haven't yet, but I am always down.
You are going to love it.
My favorite
what is your highlight? Yeah. What is, in your child's heart of magic with the dice, what is your favorite? Where do you go?
So I play with this group called Benchdale Academy, and it's a bunch of first edition, 7th print, so 88, first edition gamers. That even some of the people in this group are some of the creators of TS, or were part of TSR. So sometimes they pop amazing. Have Jeff Easley sitting off on the side just doodling a beholder.
Are you serious?
But my and it's not recorded, and I'm not even storytelling. I'm just a player. And every Sunday I look for that 3 hours, 4 hours of just going back to first edition, and there's no... It's like we're all trapped back in that time, right? There's probably stuff said that's probably wouldn't people go for these days. But again, there's no... there's no one that's like, wait, please don't say that kind of thing. It's, it's your old gaming group. So, either you don't care or you don't think about it. And I on all my shows, I'm very tuned to what gets you canceled, what doesn't. So that's, when I'm editing, I'm always, hey, I could put that in there. Oh, I can't. And it's not because... people intentionally say things. Again, we're around a table, right? And it's not meant to be recorded half the time because you're not used to it. And as people go down rabbit holes and you're like, oof, okay. And so, you have to get rid of all. But it's just one of those things where I don't feel like I have to be cautious about editing or doing any of that with that group just because everybody's having fun and a blast and,
I'm having a hard time getting past Jeff Easley doodling in the corner, man.
Here's your monster.
I got a little nauseated with jealousy right there. That's as an influence. We were talking about Mark Rein-Hagan for just the gaming and the way that shifted easily. Without a doubt, Jeff Easley is one of my preeminent influences. His pencil work is just out of this world.
I'm still trying to interview him. We've been emailing back and forth, and we're just trying to set up a good date to interview. And,
man, but, you fanboy out on him.
It's that's the thing about coming into this industry. I didn't ever think that I would meet a lot of the creators or meet the people that influence my childhood coming to now, and being able to interview them, talk to them, interact with them, sometimes play. It just makes me want to be in it more, dive in it more. And I've Alan Hammond, I was like, hey, do you want to be a stretch goal and maybe we could write? He's like, sure, but I know I'm gonna have to pay good money, and I would. Darlene Peck She did a lot of, or Darlene, the artist, was original TSR first female artist. She did the Greyhawk map and a lot of the D&D books inside the monsters and a lot of characters and stuff. I commissioned her every so often.
Does that just feel just surreal?
Yeah, I can't wait to publish a lot of it. She did my second look. And I have a bunch of art from a bunch of really nice people out there that created this world, and just to be able to have their digital work that's mine, I'm like, I can't wait to publish this. I can't wait to publish.
Yeah, heard.
It is nuts.
So I wanted to ask you. You were talking a little bit earlier about sensitivities when talking with people, and also when creating and writing games. I'm wondering if you could maybe, speak to us a little bit about how being in the Army sort of also affects, does it affect when you're the kinds of games and the types of games that you're playing? I would imagine so, but I'm curious as to how you deal with that, or if it's even a concern at all.
So, the one thing, because I've been to 48 different countries, I got them tattooed on my arm. But I've been stationed in a lot of them, and the cultures that I interact really influence how I game, how I perceive a lot of different cultures, right? Afghanistan, I would eat the street food while on patrol, right? People are, oh, that's terrifying. Some of the best food I've ever eaten. I'm a foodie, so I would always, everywhere I go, I'd always get. But I also played D&D, a bunch of A&A, Afghan National Army, on my fob once. We threw some dice. They didn't really understand it, which is fine. But it's the fact that we're just I've also gamed with a lot of people in Korea and all over where I go, Germany, and to get their perceptions on how they play D&D or role playing games, or how they look. Because again, everybody does play.
Does that game for? Do those experiences influence the kinds of stories and games you like to play? Are you a little more attuned to violence and that kind of thing, or is it not
No. It depends on the group, right? That's how I always do it. I ask the group what they like to do. I do some veteran games, and so I want to do house breaching. They want to do that military stuff. Riffs. We play Riffs. Modern Age. God. And we do. If you ever listen to a veteran Riffs game, it is insane because they know the terminology. They have, and you've got to be a good storyteller. They'll start doing things as a collective group, and you're like, uh-oh. And they'll eliminate something quickly just by their strategy. So that's awesome. I would say it's some of my shows that I have, there's certain sensitivities that everybody has. Yeah. And so I abide by them, obviously. And being a child of the world, I adopt everything that comes around, right? I don't have a personal vendetta against anything. I don't vote left or right. I'm just kind of floating around, right? Enjoying life. And so again, it really my writing is by the people that I'm around. So in saying that, at the same time, when I want to publish something, names in it, I definitely make sure that it's acceptable to the community, regardless of what the community that my target market is, because you're not always going to get your target market. You're going to get markets, you're going to get those Pathfinders, you're going to get the World of Darkness, you're going to get those D&D people, you're going to get those groups, you're going to get the people to look at your product. So you always have to think about what you're putting, right? What your name is going to, because like all writers, your name is your credibility. So you really have to think about, do you want to die on that hill talking about eugenics or birth, highborn, lowborn, stuff like that, dive into it. Using the term is fine as long as you're not following a style that was used many years ago, several wars, As long as you don't follow that mentality of it, you can use those words as long as it doesn't fall in that hole.
And it's it's a delicate thing in that a game like any of these, the best told games are the best told stories, and stories that we understand are the ones that we relate to the best. And we have, sadly, a history that affords us all kinds of horror to delve into. But at the same time, there's a part of these games that, I don't know, it makes that exploration okay. It makes it a little more safe, I guess. But you have to be really careful with that. You know, I was talking to Metal Mike recently, actually, about vampire and the vampire type called the Malkavians, and how they focus. Right, mine too. And they focus on the mental illness aspect. But with everything coming to light now, especially with things like education and the job industry and just homelessness and all the people that are affected by mental illness, it makes that a little more awkward just to willy-nilly run away with. You know, I think there is a lot there to be cognizant of.
I'd have to say, okay.
No, I mean, it's just, you know, how do you approach that? Is that a direct conversation with players, or?
You know, it's funny. My wife's a librarian, and so she's always getting the banned book list.
Oh my gosh!
And we've had long conversations about. And we have a lot of educated friends, doctor friends, and we've had long conversations about, you know, our history, our past, right? Someone writes a book 60 years ago, it's not going to fly now, right? Just like 3 generations ago, they're still around, right? And they still have the set. They haven't adapted to what's happening. So it's just one of those things where you have to, just like the TSR, right? There's a whole thing about TSR writers and all that stuff, but it was affecting the people loyalty, their well-being today, and they didn't have those perceptions back then. But because of the culture generation, that's the way they were writing. So the way I look at it is, I have to, when I'm writing now, and what I always tell, especially if I'm leading a team or if I'm trying to put something out, you have to think about, what's this going to be in 10 years? Is it going to be on this wavering wall of might be getting banned, or all of a sudden everybody that 10 years later are going to get hazed, attacked because something 10 years, a decade previously? So, you know, I leave it in the hands. I never say you have to write, you have this. I usually, when I come up with something, what do you want to write? What's our, again, structure? I'm all about building the left and right limits to whatever project, and be like, where do we want to go, and what's it going to look like down the road? And I think back in the day, they didn't think like that. They didn't think, what's this going to be?
Why would they?
Yeah.
Right?
Why would they?
But we have to do that now, right? Our generation, or the generation current, the previous generation, are revolutionizing the way the needs to view, and it may or may not be the best way, but we got to ride the road. It's like in the 50s, that was a whole change too. So we have to, a majority of us have to just adapt and be accepting of what's coming down the road. Who knows what's going to be in 20 years? The cancel culture might be getting canceled for the way they're getting canceled. So, you know, it's that you have, it's how you view it, right? And it's how you want to be perceived 20 years from now. And that's what I think, especially if you're publishing. If you're publishing, think about it.
Yeah, because your name's going to be hooked to that forever. But, you know, in the next 20 years, I mean, I don't know if you've watched the movie, read the book, Ready Player One.
Yep.
It's an outstanding book. And the whole idea of this alternate reality, this narrative that we invent, I think in the next 20 years, we're going to have like data jack implants in our skull and just, you know, start playing right in your head. And I think I'm down for that.
It's already happening.
You are not, Adam.
The newer headsets are very real. I've only done it once, and it was terrifying because it was just terrifying. But it's getting to that point that you know, and you go to some of these places, 3D, they made the holodeck basically, right? Mm-hmm. Your environment is your movement, and your whole 360 plus the headset on, it enhances your thing. The military is using it too. The military, a lot of weapons training, future weapons training, it's done in 360 simulations.
Oh,
sometimes
absolutely.
they don't want to put soldiers out on. They'll put them in a warehouse, put you in a suit. They exist, and you're in 360, and you're in North Korea, going through it, and you're on a platform, and you are walking. You just have to search your place. So it does exist.
You're talking a language I love, man.
But I mean, it's like you know it's a computer. It does have its drawbacks, but the way our technology is going, definitely gonna with the AI and everything. And I think a lot of people get caught up on AI, just like back in the day, people got caught up on computers. They got caught up. Yeah,
it's a big thing. It's a big thing, and you know, Michael and I have talked a lot about it, and we have opinions. I have very definite opinions, and mine are surprising to me. I've come into the technology thing really late, and I resist it on every front unless I am made to utilize it. And so I get there, but it takes me a lot longer, and it causes everybody that's around me a lot more pain than it should. But what I've learned is that I think the just to take art AI as an example, you know, if we're talking about taking of the content, that's one thing. If we're talking about stylistic issues, that's another. And I think that with everything developing like it is, there's going to be a point where you could have any livelihood, whether it is down to shoveling manure up to a CEO of a multi-billion industry, and you could produce something with art and editing and writing. And at the end of the day, it allows us to get content and stories out there, right? And I think that's okay.
I think AI, you know, with art, I think art and the writing AI, right? It's, you know, if you use your AI to write your stories for, or you have the AI do your art, it's more or less how much you're letting it do for you and take outside of your creative thought, right? Mm-hmm. It's about building this right and left, what's acceptable. And mm-hmm. I think with AI right now, because it developed quickly, and just like anything, the gaming industry is not wanting to make changes, game systems, additions, and stuff like that, right? Everybody, there's always an uproar about but there wasn't any limits to what is acceptable for AI art, what's acceptable for AI writing. Even in the academic world, my professor, I still talk, and he's like, oh man, half the class used JetGPT to write this paper for, and I'm like, what do you do? And he's like, oh, I have to turn them in basically. But he's like, I don't mind if they use it, if they take it and reword it in their own words, because everybody needs that little help. It's kind of like with art. You have a concept, you have an idea, especially if your person that commissioned you gives you a paragraph of the intense things. You use AI to give you a concept idea of what that looks like, and then you base off of that. That's different, right? Or if you take that image itself, still render it, and it's more of a moral aspect. So if you look at it now, we have drawing artists, illustrators, digital artists, AI artists, right?
Yeah.
Now you have to determine the cost of this, right? Handwritten art is still always going to be the most expensive time.
More expensive.
You have to worry about the AI person saying, hey, I hand did that, right? It's more of an individual dilemma when it comes to it, but everybody has the perception that AI is taking the artist's job. Some artists go for it, right? You know, people still good artists. I don't really use AI art that much. I don't understand it. But, so I go to you guys, right? I go to you guys, and you know, I still get the concepts that I like, and if I could figure out AI art, I could do it for some of the stuff, but I will always go back, because sometimes prompts don't get me what I want, or like a paragraph explaining to like you, like, hey, these slimes have this and this, and all of a sudden I'm just blown away.
Well, that's what I always like about like the social media and building the community aspect of it, is because with our game in particular, Battle Sauce, I've worked really hard to find different types of artists, and it's fun to get those different types of styles. Something that I might not have seen before, or would even know how to prompt in an AI situation. So we've used a bunch of different artists, and I think that's really, in our game sort of calls for that, because it's kind of like a riff type thing.
Yeah.
But that's the one thing that I'm always surprised about. I love to see other people's styles, and I think AI is very sort of fluent, or not fluent. Well, yeah, it is fluent in a certain style, and I think with social media and community and stuff like that, it really helps me to be able to see what other people are capable of doing and how different that they can do something. And I'm like, wow, that's really cool. I like your take on this, and that's fun to incorporate that kind of stuff.
And that's the thing about a computer, right? A computer is going to do exactly what you tell it.
What you tell it, yeah.
Where you want...
Unless you're me.
Yeah, you want... I want that art where I give that description, but then I like to see that twist that the artist
right, yeah.
do it. Where the
Absolutely.
AI most likely give you exactly what you put it. Great, I got what I... but some of us, like, I wish it had this little picture. Yeah. And you can't go back to the AI like, oh, can you change? Because again, it's a computer. And the most recent thing I saw, guy took Midjourney, took all the specs, and went to whatever it is.
Yeah, Adam, you sent that one to me.
That was out of date. Yeah, and taught it how to read this program, and then it started doing it. Right, that's the most scariest thing I've ever seen. Not because
on the cusp of Star Trek here.
Yeah. It wasn't so much that the art looked right. It was the fact that you were able to take something textbook style and give it to. Luckily, they've attached moral, things, moral codes into some of these. But there's a lot of AIs out there that don't have moral. A lot of countries out there that don't put moral code in there. So most of these, if you're like, hey, tell me how to make HME bomb, it won't. And most likely it'll report you, but it'll say, hey,
and rightly so.
This. But you just have to word it correctly, and then it'll give you the things. It'll probably still report you, but there's some countries out there, some AIs, not countries, but AIs out there that don't have that blocker, and it'll give you those things, and then you can take those books. So let's take Hitler's book, right? And you put it in the system and say, hey, make this relevant to today. It'll rewrite it to fit today's moral compass, right? And that's the scariest thing.
Or lack thereof.
Disturbing. That's what that is.
That's why, just because the person showed me the art and took two AIs and they communicated and said, hey, there's another one where they didn't speak the same language, and the person put it in their language, and so the AI learned that entire language dialect to respond to the person, the answer. So the AI learned on its own, which again, that's what it's supposed to do. But it's like there's no limits. There's no right and left limits. The way
it's all out there, man. Everything is wide open.
Yeah, I think a lot has to do. If you're a fantasy writer and you have the AI write all your stuff for you, and you produce it and put it out there, whatever, great. But is it what you want it to be? And are you a writer, or are you just trying to profit at that point? So
you're a curator at that point.
Yeah,
you're just sort of curating content. And there's a difference. Now, real quick, we have 8 minutes, by the way. These things go by like it's nothing. We could talk for another hour, I'm sure, but I do want to wrap us up at 10. And just so a few closing thoughts here from me, I did want to jump real quick back to your podcast community. You've got Crumpets and Kerosene, Constructed Chaos and Lostlorn Chronicle. So what does that look like? Are those still up to date? And that's awesome.
So Constructed Chaos is another person's show that was on my network, but he didn't want to do podcasts anymore. He's strictly just wanted YouTube at this. He wasn't getting a big mark. The Lostlorn Chronicles, the team fell apart. That's a big thing about D&D groups, right? They fall apart.
Yeah, they do.
And that was a game that Mark ran, and it could have went so much further, but it was just so much chaos happening. But now I have Crumpets and Kerosene Age, Crumpets and Kerosene, Isle Souls. I have a Gaxx game that I've run. I haven't titled it yet. It's Okrim something, and we're running through all the module coming, and then we're doing Crumpets and Kerosene Legends, and it's second edition D&D game, and then we're putting together a Riffs show as well. So we're just trying to get them out there, and I don't know. I fell in love with editing.
Well, so you know, when I went to your MRE, we'll have links up, by the way, later for everything. But I went to MRE's website, and you know, I read your charter statement, and it's essentially exactly what In the Kitchen wants to become, a place where, you know, the community is at the heart of it. So we want to talk to programmers and writers and artists and designers and marketing people and podcasts, you know, things like that. And with that in mind, I would like to extend the invitation just officially. Let's get a game together soon, you know, within the next few months, and see if we can make something cool happen with that. Kelly,
I want to play your game.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Let's battle sauce it up, man. That'd be a hoot. It has been a pleasure, sir, chatting with you.
Absolutely.
We will have you back on if you are willing
sure.
to come. Nothing but admiration for the amount of effort, man, that you have put in everywhere. And speaking to that directly, Lostlorn and the writing and the art, just, you're a busy guy. I don't know how you managed to get it all in there, but you absolutely do.
Yeah, I'm hoping to you know, things smooth out. We get a structure in place, do other things, and you know, it's one of those things, you don't want to be in charge of everything. It's too much work for everybody. I think it's just once you get something in place and you know, get your teams together, getting them worked out and building solid, you know, structure.
And then run.
Itself, right? It just it works itself. Everybody does little plugins. So I think once we get that done, then, you know, we don't have to have all the chaotic, you know, stuff that we got going on. So yeah, but thank you for having me. I'd love to come back. I also do I haven't done one in a while, but there's like 88 episodes of that. Luke Gygax and a bunch of other people in the industry are in there. I just haven't had time to actually do it too. So
it's a blast, man. It's a blast. And please come back. We will definitely be here. And so if you are still with us, and it looks like our two audience members are, but for those of you that are tuning in, check out Kelly. He is at MRE, and we'll have the links up for that and for his other stuff as well. It's been a hoot, Kelly. We're going to hang out here until you guys log off. But as always, guys, be awesome, be badass, and never forget, it's all in the sauce.
Thanks again, Kelly. Really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Cool.
Absolutely.